Same old man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Chasing the Gold. I am not Shadan Larkey or Erica Richards. I am, of course, JD Duran filling in for the great Shadan Larkey. She could not be here. She is traveling for the summer. So I am filling in because, as you may know, there was a major festival that just took place over in France. The Cannes Film Festival just unfolded over the last few weeks, and we needed to talk about it. We needed to go over the great films that were playing over there, and man, there were some exciting titles that, at least from my perspective, it sounds like we're going to get this fall. And joining me to talk about them, because we do have someone that was over there that was watching those movies and was writing about them at In Session Film for us. Joining me for this conversation is the great Hector Gonzalez. Hector, thanks for being here and joining me, my friend.
Thank you for having me. I'm tired, I'm exhausted, but I'm running and gunning. I'm still writing reviews. I still have a couple to go.
Yeah, no, it's been great. It's been awesome to see and read your work as they come. It's been great to see the reaction generally from people, and you've been doing such a great job for us. I'm really grateful for all the work that you're doing, and I'm excited to dive into these films because it does seem as if we're going to have a really incredible fall season based off the lineup that was played over at Cannes this year. And we do have some exciting titles to get into. Well, let's start with the competition, or the films that won the awards. Let's start there. Particularly, there's one name we have to kick things off with. Well, we always will start with the Palme d'Or winner. But this year, it's especially exciting because I love Jafar Panahi. He's one of my favorite filmmakers. The man doesn't miss. It's an incredible story. And he finally wins the Palme d'Or. It was incredible. So tell us about the film. What did you think of it? And the reaction that we got to see from Panahi. It was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, it is his first, in quotes, free film, although it wasn't approved by the Iranian government, so it's technically an illegal film, but he is free. His first free film in about 20 years. He has been imprisoned or in house arrest for many years, and his films have played in festivals. He has won the Golden Lion and the Golden Bear, and now the Palme d'Or. He's one of the few filmmakers that have won those awards, but in those years he wasn't there to claim those awards. He wasn't there.
Sure.
So it is. It is very fascinating that no one knew he was going to come to Cannes. So it's fascinating. He was there. He was there with us, celebrating film and his work and his, him overall. It was fascinating just to see him next to all of us. So it was a very fascinating thing overall. Even though the film, whether it was good or bad, overall, just seeing him in person, he might not even had a film in competition. He was there. It would have been already a thing to applaud for. And when he appeared, everybody just stood up and applauded because of everything he has gone through.
For sure.
It is a very difficult life, and he has remained resilient and rebellious with his art and his words. So it is something everybody can champion. It is something wonderful that he is finally free.
Yeah, it's incredible. I'm not a proponent of the biopic, and we get a lot of biopics that are unnecessary. That is a story maybe worth telling one day because it is truly incredible what he has experienced and the resilience that he's shown as you're talking about making these films guerrilla style, illegally and rebelliously, and they're really great. He bats 1,000 for me, and I absolutely love everything that he does. And here he is now with his latest, and it wins the Palme d'Or. And as you're talking about, he's there in person, and that's been one of my favorite videos that I've seen in quite some time. That reaction shot of him winning and the elation, it was almost cathartic. It was palpable to see, and I couldn't have been happier for him. It was such a joyous moment. I absolutely loved seeing it. But what did you think about the film itself? And is it how do you feel about it being this year's Palme d'Or winner?
I think it's a great winner. I think it's a very solid winner. Not my personal pick, but I'm not mad
Okay.
at it at all.
Yeah. Sure.
It was a great film. Because like his other films, it is a morality tale, but with an ironic title. It was just an
Yeah.
accident. There
Sure.
is well, the previous title, it was a simple accident, which I think is fitting. I think it's more fitting because it begins with a little accent and then evolves into something greater, into a reflection on people maintaining their humanity,
Mm,
trying to maintain their humanity. I mean,
sure.
amidst a regime that wants to rip it away and wants to take it all away, and it's basically like his previous films, but with this sense of freenessness,
Mm,
yet a rebelliousness, because as I mentioned, it wasn't approved by the Iranian government, and it
yeah.
comments against them. It's still Panahi at his most like fierce, at his most like angry. It's angsty, yet it has some
Yeah.
brevity and some comedic moments. But at its core, it is like his previous films. It is totally rebellious. It is rebel filmmaking, in not specifically a blunt way as other filmmakers have. Not a punk style, but this is another version of punk, of being against the system, of being
Nice.
against these oppressive regimes. And I think Panahi, deserves this win. It is not just because the film itself is great, but it is what he stands for. It is what he has done. It is how he has done it. It is filmmaking, but he has made films, but he's not there directing per se. He's not on the sets. He's on either house arrest or in prison.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's very fascinating that this film, not only was great like his previous work, but it is this compact and is still as angry as he once was like 20 years ago,
Mm,
or 25 years ago, or since he
sure.
began his career. He is still raising that fist, for justice, and going
Yeah.
against the scrutiny, of the Iranian government. So it's fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, with what you're describing there, it does sound quite cathartic. This film is for him. And given what he's experienced, even just in recent years, it makes sense that he still has that righteous anger in him. And I'm really excited to see how that is born in this film. The way he's able to take those experience and manifest art out of it. There's not many working on his level in that regard. I love Panahi. I'm deeply excited for him. This sounds really, really exciting. Of course, Neon sweeping in to buy this one up right before the jury came out with their selections. And I'm really excited to see what Neon does with this one when we get to the fall season. The next film that we need to talk about is the Grand Prix runner, Sentimental Value. This is Joachim Trier. And it's interesting because when the reactions first dropped with Sentimental Value, I think there was an argument to that was the front runner to win the Palme d'Or. The reactions were very strong overall,
Yeah.
and maybe even more so than it was just an accident. but as sometimes it tends to be when you're voting on these things, you tend to vote with your heart perhaps a little bit more. And the narrative, for all the reasons we just talked about with Panahi, it is really, really strong. But sentimental value arguably could be the best coming out of the festival, at least if you go by the broad reaction, the broad, strong reaction to all of these movies. But tell me about sentimental value. What did you think of Trier's latest?
I think it is good, but I don't think it is as great as many has been saying,
Okay.
online or in their writing, but people have connected with it the same way
Yeah.
they
Oh
connected
yeah.
with The Worsters in the World or Oslo 31st, Oslo August
Sure.
31st, my bad, and Reprise, he has become a filmmaker. Like that audiences can depend on him like to connect. He has written like very touching and personal stories that also in some way or another, they connect with our own experiences, even though they are personal to them or
Sure.
similar to what he
Yeah.
has gone through, but still it connects. He finds a way to find these emotional tangibilities, that really like sink into us and like make us, understand the characters because we had gone through similar things. And with this one is no different, although there are elements in the story that I'm not convinced entirely of because it centers around the Borg family, and after the mother has passed away, two sisters are reunited with their estranged, distant father. He's a
Okay.
filmmaker who has spent the last 15 years, trying to come up with a project, and he finally lands on one that he believes is his best work to date. But the role is specific to one of the sisters, to Nora, Renate Reinsve, and she doesn't want anything to do with him, so she rejects. He's baffled by the offer, and some time passes, and he reveals that he's going to continue with the project, but with
Okay.
another actress, an American actress, Rachel
Mm.
Kemp, played by Elle
Elle
Fanning.
Fanning. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he wants to shoot the film in their family house, in their childhood house. But with that comes a bit like some some ghosts from the past begin to appear, but not literal or metaphorical ghosts. It's just the pain that's carved within the walls and the house and the gardens and the rooms. The film begins with a voice, narrating some experiences that have occurred in the house, from Stellan Skarsgård character when he was a child to now the now older, with his daughters, as they grew
Okay.
up and now as they're older. It describes that the house has hold on by that pain that has
Mm.
lingered in that house. He left them when they were little, so they had to go through plenty of things. That sense of abandonment. So, and that film reflects that, but within the film concept, the film within the film, it's mostly the production of one, but we don't actually see the real picture. It is
Sure.
preparing a film, and I think that is what hurts a little bit the film because it
Mm.
departs a bit from what he has done before, which is more grounded, which is more like less dependent on the artistic expression more so, and more on emotion, more on like real life scenarios. This one is a little bit more specific, and within that specificity, I think it loses itself a bit, at least for me it does. But as you have
Okay.
heard and read, many people loved it and many people thought it was the shoe-in from the Palme d'Or.
Yeah. It seemed that
But
way based off the reaction initially.
yeah,
Yeah.
but usually, the most acclaimed film doesn't win. Like
Yeah.
Zone of Interest didn't win the Palme d'Or. It went to Anatomy of a Fall.
Yeah.
And it usually doesn't
Yeah.
go that way. But somehow it felt like it was going to be the winner. No, it
Yeah.
ended up with the Grand Prix with the second place. But many great films have won the Grand Prix and not the Palme. So
Sure. Sure.
so it
Yeah.
is not. It's still an honorary award to
For sure.
receive.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to it. I really adore Joachim Trier as a filmmaker. Oslo August 31st was really good. The Worst
Yeah.
Person in the World was in my top 10 when it first came out, but a few years removed, and that film is inching closer and closer to my number one of that year. I have really come to love that film a lot. I still think about it often. So, Sentimental Value is certainly one of my most anticipated films of the year. And I'm really intrigued by how you're describing it. I think the element of The Worst Person in the World that really worked for me was that blend of Trier's filmmaking and its magical realism tethered to its grounded poignancy. I really love that in the film. So we'll see if he's able to achieve something similar here with Sentimental Value. I am really looking forward to it. Neon, another, scooping in and getting this one as well. So with Mubi, I should note Mubi does get the international rights for this, and it was just an accident, but Neon is
Yeah.
doing the North American distribution for both of those movies. So
Yeah.
they're going to be really busy come this fall. Let's go to the jury prize winners. We have two of them here, Surratt and Sound of Falling. What did you think about those two?
Those two were some of my favorite from the
Mm,
festival. And
okay.
it is really fascinating that they shared the jury prize,
Yeah.
because these are two of the most like ravishing and distinctive cinematic voices to come as surprises in the competition, because
Mm,
Masha Shelinsky has made one film prior, and Oliver Lax, he's not so well known, but within the Cannes circuit, he was in the Quinzon with his first film, then moved on to Uncertain Regard, and he's now in competition. So he has moved the steps slowly to be in this honorary
interesting.
place.
Yeah.
It's
Sure.
two different methods. Shelinsky, got selected for a sophomore feature, and now Surratt has been slowly climbing the steps to be there. But still,
Mm,
these are
yeah.
two distinctive and original international voices that people should immediately seek out, because it is so fresh. It's basically so fresh, and the word poetic will be heard very much in many of the films that screened in the festival, but they are poetic. They are very much poetic. Sound of
Mm,
Falling is more atmospheric, more nightmarish, more ghostly. Meanwhile, the rat is has a mixture between tension and liveliness, and despondency as well.
mm,
One is set in a German farmhouse between time and memory, as we are told. We hear, we see the lives of four generations of women who have lived in the house. And Serat is set in the Moroccan desert, in a travel, as they travel from one point to another, in the way of Wages of Fear and Sorcerer or Mad Max Fury Road. But
mm,
it takes the
interesting.
part of Mad Max Fury Road not in action set pieces or the popcorn entertainment. It takes the element of taking the wasteland of Mad Max Fury Road
Yeah.
as a purgatory, as a place, as an endless cycle of violence, as a circular motion. You keep on and you keep on, and everything's basically the same. The only people that are moving are those that are still holding on to hope, or those dancing in the face of death. It's very, very fascinating. And Sound of Falling, it's in a way very Malikian, in the way that it
Mm,
uses narration, the way that it processes its images, and the visual language. Again, it's two very fascinating projects from on the rise. Should seek out international voices that I think will take the world by storm. I think Shelinsky will be a very prominent director in the future. Well, she is now. She is a very strong now, but I think more prominent. She will be like more
sure.
known. And
Sure.
Sarah, I think with Sarah, I think it will connect very much with audiences. I think people will be blown away by
Mm,
this. I think people would connect with both films. I think Sound of Falling is trickier because it's more artsy. It's not overstyled, but it is more for the artsy crowd, not as much as Serrat is. Serrat is more open in
Yeah.
some sense, but the two are very fascinating projects, and
Yeah.
I think it's curious that they ended up sharing a prize. Two of the most
Yeah.
creative pictures in the lineup. It
Sure.
sharing a prize. It was great to see.
Anytime you invoke Malik, you have piqued my interest. I am there. I am 100% there. I love Malik. He's one of my favorites. So if these films have any ounce of Malik in them, I am very, very excited. But honestly, even outside of that, for all the reasons that you were just describing there, they both sound extremely promising. I am really curious about Sarad and the idea of taking the wasteland and turning it into a purgatory. That sounds really fantastic, coupled with its premise, which, as I read here, is about a father looking for his lost daughter. So that sounds very much up my alley. And Sound of Falling, that's also an intriguing premise. I'm really curious. I love movies about memory and connection and time generally, and this sounds like it's going to be another great one. So those two very much high on my list for the fall season as well. Let's talk about The Secret Agent. This is the film that won 2 awards for director and actor. It's not often that a film will win 2 awards. Of course,
Yeah.
it did happen last year.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, very unfortunately. The Secret Agent, I'm hoping, is more warranted, we shall say.
No, it is. It is. Of course, because Emilia Perez is like bottom of the barrel cinema.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
atrocious. It wasn't the worst film that I saw at last year's Cannes, but it was atrocious. It was
Yeah. Not
awful,
good.
and I will always hate that film with my entire heart.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan either. But tell me about The Secret Agent. What did you think of that one?
Secret Agent, The Secret Agent is a really fascinating film because the director, Kilve Montilho Filo, I think it's called. I'm not Mendoza Filo. I'm not like pronouncing the the name right,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
but I love his films. I love his films. But the interesting thing that he does is that 2 years ago he did a documentary called Pictures of Ghosts, and in that
Okay.
film
Yep.
it's a cine essay in which he reflects on not only the erasure of the cinema in the Recife area of Brazil, but also the loss of culture that comes with such. The photographs and videos, the memories of people from the past. And he describes it as such as pictures of ghosts of people that are literally not here anymore because they have passed away, but there's no
Yeah.
recollection to them anymore. And in some way, shape, or form, he adds that to a political thriller nor picture style film in The Secret Agent with nods to 70s cinema in the way of political thrillers, and there's elements of noir, and there's a sweaty nature, that comes from films like what's the film with Gene Hackman? There's a film with
Uh,
Gene.
the
Oh
Conversation.
man. No, not the conversation. Man, I forgot the name of it. But no worries, no worries. I think well, I won't recall it. But no
The
worries.
Royal
No.
Tenenbaums. No, I'm just kidding.
The Royal, which I
Yes,
couldn't see.
it's
I
Wes
couldn't see.
Anderson,
I
is what you're
couldn't
saying.
see.
I
I
get you.
couldn't see.
Yeah.
I couldn't see the Wes Anderson film. I wasn't going to see. I wasn't going to see it because it releases so soon.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it wasn't like
Sure.
worth the booking
Yeah. Fair
price.
enough.
So, but
Yeah.
anyways, it uses those elements of political thrillers and noir pictures and 70s cinema to talk about that, to talk about culture, the loss, the erasure of culture, the erasure of memory, and it honors those people that keep, that keep the memory intact, that keep the historical records, that help
Mm.
elevate the roots, the traits, the life in that area, in the Recife area. It's again centered on the same place, but in two different times. One in two different mediums as well. One in documentary form, in cine essay form, and one in this vast cinematic, more cinematic canvas. And
Yeah.
it is very touching. It is very touching while it blends all of these different elements in the way of Baccarat, which was a thriller and a mystery and a
Yeah.
western. But it was about that as well. The erasure of memory, specifically about those people who have lived through oppressive regimes. That most of that photographs and videos are erased, and adding that to the erasure of cinema and pictures of ghosts, it creates a very poignant double feature, and between
Yeah.
this and that and the secret agent. And I think it is very much deserved, those two wins. Mac Wagner Mora for best actor, and Philo with best director.
Yeah.
Wagner Mora won because not only he is solid, but also in comparison to the best actors crop, there weren't that many astonishing performances by men. There were Tahar
Okay.
Rahim for Alpha and Robert Pattinson for Die My Love, but there weren't like that many to choose from. So I think Wagner Moore
Okay.
was the best, and the best out of the few that were. But
Sure.
with Philo and Best Director, I think it is because not only they want to honor the film a little bit more. I think they could have gave it a special jury prize or a jury prize or whatever, but
Yeah.
they had to share a little bit of the pie. And I wish that they did that more. Instead of giving a film two awards or tying, which those are in some ways they break the rules, but there are no rules technically. But
Yeah.
they,
Sure.
they should follow that only one award per film as they have done before. But in the last couple of years, they do that. It's like when they give awards to an entire ensemble,
Yeah.
or
Sure.
when with Blue the Warmest Color, when they give an award to the
Yeah.
Palme d'Or goes to the director, and it went to the two actresses, which
Yeah.
I think it was deserving, in that case, because the two actresses make the film and the director is not a good person.
Sure.
so
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it honored the two actresses that are
Might
two
as
of the
well go to
best
the two
French actresses
actresses.
today.
Yeah.
Exactly. But in this case, I think it is very well deserved. I think Philo has made such a weird concoction of genre and
Yeah.
themes, in play in The Secret Agent, that I think it is very fascinating. I think it is a very compact project that its first half, its first hour, you're like, okay, I don't know where this is headed. But in the second half, that's where all of the erasure of culture, the maintain your roots, your traits, that's where it comes from. And
Mm.
when that second half arrives, you're like very moved by such. And I think it's
Gotcha.
fascinating how he adds that to a political thriller noir picture. I think
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
few directors can manage that balance. They might be
Sure.
lost in one or the other, but they can combine the two. So that adds to his talent.
Yeah. That to me sounds incredible because while I'm not familiar with Phil's first two features, Baccarat in 2019 was really quite remarkable. And I think what's so spellbinding about that film is that it somehow manages to be every genre at once. All genres are in that movie. It's quite incredible. And the film never commits to any of them, but it seamlessly blends them into a singular experience.
Yeah,
One of the best magic tricks I've seen from a tonal and aesthetic perspective. And of course, it has blistering commentary underneath all of that, which sounds a lot of what you're talking about with the secret agent, but this time through the lens of it being a political thriller with these Norrish qualities to it, as you're talking about, and being this rich thematic exercise simultaneously. So if he's able to achieve that once again, as he did with Bacurau, I am wholeheartedly in on this film. I cannot wait. And then you couple that with Wagner Morris' performance as well. Yeah, a lot to look forward to here with The Secret Agent. Brazil having a great time right now.
Yeah.
They're on a roll, with I'm Still Here last year, now The Secret Agent this year. I'm sure that fan base is going to be ready to rock and roll again once we get to the fall
Yeah.
with this
They
film.
surely will.
Absolutely. And this was also another Neon scoop. They came in, got this one. So they're going to be busy this fall. They're going to be busy with all of these movies. Okay, let's talk about The Little Sister. Let's talk about Best Actress before we get to some of the other major titles I want to talk about. Nadia Malidi, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but she wins Actress for The Little Sister. What did you think about that one?
Yeah, that was one of the more not disappointing, but one of the weaker, like, in competition films. I wasn't blown away by it.
Okay.
But no, the director is Hafsia Erzi. She's a very talented actress, and she's a director as well. But no, I haven't been too much. No, I haven't seen her work until this one. I have seen her acting work, but not her directorial work. But her being an actress, usually actors that become directors, do churn out, their cast to make great performances, to be their very best. They focus on performances, and Nadia Maliti, does a very good job. She's great in the film. Although the film, is quite like modular, like it's more or less, not the same as the rest of the films at the in competition, that they were like very creative, very artistic. This one is less so. It's more grounded. It's more not that playful in terms of its narrative structure or story. It's a very simple story, but it does have great performances. It does have great performances, and I think
Okay.
Nadia Meliti can go the same route as her co-lead, well, not co-lead, but cast member, Park Ji-min, who was also like a Cannes standout a few years ago with Return to Seoul, and had many people talk about like a revelation. So I think Nadia Meliti can be as well a revelation from this film, even though it isn't that great of a film. It is one of the weaker ones from the competition, but at least her performance shines, and the win, although surprising, I think it's quite worthy. I think it's deserving.
Mhm.
Many
And this
people
is her
thought.
screen debut. Am I reading that correctly for Milady?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. It was her debut, and that's what makes it fascinating,
That's
because Park
crazy. Wow.
Ji-min was also a debutante with
Yeah.
Return to Seoul. So it's like pairing the two, like the two can standouts. Although Park Ji-min didn't win an award at Cannes in 2022, I believe, but Nadia Maliti did. So I think she has a path to become this like it girl, this new like fresh
Yeah.
fresh face on the European market, and she's great, and she's a great actress, So people
Yeah.
thought that it was
Sure.
going to be Jennifer Lawrence who's going to win, but it's a bit too obvious. It's a bit too like mainstream, and
Sure. Well, I
going with
mean,
this is surprising.
yeah, and some people have pointed this out, but on that note, it's interesting that none of the winners here are American. They're not
Yeah,
North American born. These are all international winners, which is really exciting. I'm sure Jennifer Lawrence is great in Die My Love. I
yeah,
do want to talk
yes.
about that here in a moment, and maybe it'll translate to awards here in North America later on in the fall season. But as far as Cannes goes, I do find this exciting that it is focused in that specific way. Um, yeah, I don't know what to make of the little sister, but the fact that this is Milady's screen debut and she just wins Best Actress over at Cannes over a Jennifer Lawrence is really intriguing. Really, really looking forward to that. Before we get to Die My Love, though, real quick though, I do want to note the pre-special goes to Resurrection, which looks incredible just based off the still images that are floating around for that film. Um, what did you think about that one?
That okay, it is not my favorite film of the competition, but it is
Okay.
my it is my pick, my personal pick for the Palm. That was my personal pick for the Palm
Okay.
because it's so outrageous and so mesmerizing that
Okay.
it was my immediate pick. And okay, I will try to give you a taste of what the film is about because
Okay.
it is very difficult. and and everything that you read as plot synopsis goes, it won't say anything, and
Yeah.
like it doesn't describe the film like properly. And
Okay.
many people thought that the film wasn't even going to like screen because the early like market and newspaper press screenings were canceled, and he was still
Oh
editing the
wow.
film 2 days before the festival premiere. So
Wow.
there were and it was the late edition of the late editions of the festival. It was the very last film to be added, and
Oh
so
wow.
it was
Okay.
like this weird like like what was it like what is this film like what is begun cooking, and
Yeah.
what he's making, it's so fascinating. So I because I knew I was going to have difficulty in describing, I tried to write down the least spoilery synopsis, and this is going to be like the best thing that you're going to hear.
Okay.
So
Okay.
first,
Okay.
it is high concept and it is set in the future, but we don't actually see like futuristic stuff, like not like I don't know, like a Blade Runner, although it has a keen Blade Runner elements in some way, shape, or form. But it isn't that type of world. It isn't cyberpunk or such. It is mostly seen through a dream landscape, and everything feels like ripped out of reality. It feels like that, like concoctions of dreams and nightmares. Is like heavy, hazy imagination. So we have 5 chapters, and each of these chapters is a different like dream state. It is different landscapes, and each one is referring and does nods to different types of cinema. In one there's German expressionism, and other there's silent film, another is more like a war setting, and in another is like monster movie, and there's like vampires, and there's references to Vertigo with a musical piece, and the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and another one. And it is an ode to cinema in all of these chapters. So basically, there is these type of people who decide to dream because in that place people are basically immortal, or they can live longer if they don't dream. But there are a few people that decide to go against the grain and dream and head to these dream states that I mentioned, the 5 different ones,
Okay.
and venture upon. But at the same time, there are these people who can tell the difference between reality and dream, and they hunt these people that go on these dream states. So in that sense, there's the Blade Runner
Okay.
element.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's okay. So there are things that work, and there are things that don't, because it is very messy. It is very high concept. There are a lot of themes, and there are a lot of things that it plays with, but you are just so mesmerized by it all. Like, it's such a
Yeah.
creative thing. It is such a fascinating project. No, and I heard that he was inspired in making this ode to cinema, and like talk about dreams and nightmares, and like the desire to dream, and the people who do not want to dream, because there was a report that during the pandemic many people were having like very vivid dreams. They were dreaming like things that like in some way felt like palpable. They were like exuberant during their dream state, and it was because of the isolation and the enclosure.
Sure.
So he wanted to
Sure.
make something out of it, because the film he was going to make previously, as it was reported, it was very different from what we have now. It wasn't this high concept project. So because of the pandemic, he shifted towards doing this, and when you see it, you notice why it took him 7 years, 7 years,
Yeah.
8 years to make a new film. No, because
Yeah.
it is
Sure. Sure.
very, it looks expensive. The production's so detailed, and the look and the atmosphere, and like literally everything. Like it is. I want to read more about how he made all of this happen. Like the budget and the production overall, because it is so rich and so fascinating, so tangible and so vivid. It is dreamy. It is that is cinema. It is that encapsulation of what makes cinema. Dreams. Why it makes us dream, and why we
Yeah.
connect with it so much. It is such a fascinating piece of work, and that's the reason why it was my
Yeah.
personal palm. But
Sure.
it doesn't have that political element, that like sense of importance, like why now type of
Yeah. Yeah.
sensibility that Panahi has. But
No,
again, like
that's
it's so it's so great.
no, it's everything you're describing there just makes me giddy. Like I cannot wait to see this. Because I'm looking at my letterbox review for Long Day's Journey End Tonight, and the first thing that I wrote was, I'll admit I have no idea what I was watching, but I was mesmerized by it. And that seems like we're going to have the same experience again with
Yes,
Resurrection.
yeah, that is the review that I have taken the longest time to write, because I'm still stuck. I'm still like a few days
Yeah.
have passed. I'm still quite stuck in like how to fix my thoughts upon it. But it's very fascinating. It's like you need,
It sounds
like I
awesome.
wish,
Yeah.
I want to see it again. Like it's one of the few films from the festival that I really want to see. Like I liked a lot of them, but I need to see this one again. I need to pick it apart. Like there's a need to keep picking it apart, like to dissect all of these images. No, it is really, really fascinating.
Yeah. Everything you're describing there sounds intoxicating, and I cannot wait to see the film for all those reasons. And the cherry on top, the score here by M83. Oh, so my gosh. Yes, I cannot wait. I cannot wait. I am
Yeah,
dying to see this movie. All
the
right.
only thing, one last thought. The only thing that may may have ruined the experience for some, it was that it screened, very late into the festival, and that's a minor like problem when it comes to these to that programming. The film wasn't
Sure.
finished, so it needed, that time. But
Yeah, yeah.
you have, by that point you have seen so many films, and you're tired, and and occasionally might be on a film, and you might like and you might get a little bit of sleep, you feel sleepy and such, but with this one, you were completely alert. But many people were like, I need to see it again because of that, because it screened so late. And by that point in the festival, you have seen like 30 something films, or
Sure.
like
Sure.
20, like late 20 films, and you need to write about the great majority of them, and there's no time,
Sure.
and to eat and rest, like it is tiresome,
I'm sure.
and sometimes when you're like covering festivals, you want to give every film the same attention as you did like the first one. You were like
Sure.
100%, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And when you look back, when you see it again and like read your review, you're like, okay, I might have been right, but you look back at it and you're like, you see it with almost a
Yeah.
new set of
Sure.
eyes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really looking forward to that one. Scooped up by Janus Films for the
Yeah.
North American rights at the very least. So, very much looking forward to that one. I do, as much as I could listen to you talk about that all day, I do want to move on to a few others. Let's start with Die My Love. So, going back to January when we did our most anticipated of the year, this was my number 5 on
Okay.
my top 10 most anticipated list. I love Lynn Ramsey. She's one of the best. I am disheartened that she has to wait as long as she does to make a movie. If it was me, if I was a billionaire, I would just simply fund Lynn Ramsey. That would be my full time job. So we get more Lynn Ramsey. I love her work. Now she's here with Robert Pattinson and Jennifer Lawrence. Tell me about it. What did you think?
It's curious that you like both Lynn Ramsey and Terrence Malick, both filmmakers who
Yeah,
who take a long time
I know.
making their projects.
I
It is
well, it's
grueling,
fun. It's
but
funny that you bring up Malik because I've like his. I don't know if we're ever gonna get The Way of the Wind, but it's been on my most anticipated list for like 5 years in a row.
yeah,
Like it just,
it's coming soon. It will come. It will arrive,
yeah,
but nobody knows when.
yeah. So who
But
knows? But yes, love them both. But yeah, it just of course my favorite filmmakers. It just we never hear from them ever. It's so heartbreaking. Anyway, Die My Love. What did you think?
Die My Love was great. It took me a little bit of time to actually like it as much as I do, because
Okay.
if you compare it, well, it is unfair to compare it with the rest of her work, because they're very different from one another. But I'm very much akin to like Ratcatcher and Morven Collar. Those are my
Yeah, love
favorite
both of
of
those.
hers.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it isn't up to that par. It might be her weakest one, but
Okay.
overall that isn't bad because her repertoire is so solid, and this one as well. It is so solid that saying it's her weakest one is not like a dig at her at
Yeah.
any of her films.
Like
Because
her
they're
her
all very
weakest film
good.
would be a lot of other filmmakers' best movies.
Exactly that. So this one is basically that. It is her in technicality her weakest one, but it is still a very significant addition to her filmography. And in some way, shape, or form, it is somehow related to her previous work. You were never really here, in the same way that
Mm.
um, the Joaquin Phoenix's Joe Cross is consumed by his trauma and nightmares. In this case, Jennifer Lawrence's Grace, who have moved from another place, from New York to I don't remember now. I don't remember if it was Oklahoma, but he goes to the house of his partner's uncle, who is the house is abandoned because the uncle killed himself, a few years back. And so they move on to this house to start their family. It's a very big house, and you start to think, well, Jennifer Lawrence in a big house, and she's pregnant. You begin to think about mother. You
Yep.
begin to think about
You
Aronofsky's
immediately
mother
go there. Yep.
immediately. And there is a feral nature to her performance and the film as well. But it isn't like Aronofsky, who depended on the hysteria, and the hysteria like drove the film. In this case, the hysteria somehow structures it, but it's not that exaggerated as it is in Mother. It's not that hectic. It's not a biblical parable, like Mother. It is more about motherhood and marriage, but not in that sense.
Yeah.
Ramsey doesn't exaggerate each scenario. And I think Jennifer Lawrence is just unforgettable. She delivers, like she does hysteria like
Yeah.
no other actors can. And when she's pushed to the limit, like she was in Mother and in Die My Love, I think she brings out her best work. It may not be the most approachable work or the one that will get her the most award recognition, but it is some astonishing work. It is a project that only she can do. You can name a couple actresses, but there's something in how she does hysteria and at the same time inner calmness, but expressed like outward. That it's very intoxicating to see. And you know Ramsey also has a way with actors and their lead actors, that
Yeah.
helps them like do different kinds of methods and like
Yeah.
personalities, and with a dependent director in Ramsey, driving Lawrence and Patterson and CC Spacek, it brings out the best of them. And I think
Yeah.
it, I think it might be her second best performance, because I still hold Mother to a very high regard, but it is
Yeah.
tied. It is very much so like intertwined with Mother.
Yeah, I am really interested, not just because of the Lynn Ramsey of it all, or even the Robert Pattinson and Jennifer Lawrence of it, but the initial synopsis that was sold to us, and maybe you can speak to briefly. Obviously, we're not here to review the film, but maybe you can confirm this. But like, it was initially sold as this story that centers around a new mother who develops postpartum depression.
Yeah.
And that is fascinating because my wife did experience that with our first child. And it was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. I've never seen anything like it before or since. It really is a distinct and visceral experience to go through. And obviously, when I went through I was on the outside. I wasn't experiencing it, but I was seeing this person that I know and love transform right before my eyes into someone I didn't recognize.
Yeah.
So to get that from the female perspective with Jennifer Lawrence and Lynn Ramsey, I'm really curious about, like, just from that angle alone. That to me sounds really compelling, and then you couple it with Lynn Ramsey's legacy and integrity as a filmmaker and Lawrence as an actress and performer. I think there's going to be a lot there uh, that I'm deeply excited for. Coupled with all the stuff that you're talking about as well. It sounds awesome. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Can't wait for that one. Okay, moving on to the next one. Should we talk about Eddington? Should we get into the polarizing Ari Aster? Maybe let's just do it. Let's go there next. Man, the reactions all over the place. Where do you fall on the spectrum?
No, it was awful.
Okay, there we go. Okay.
And it's unfortunate because I like Ari Aster very much. I like Hereditary. I love Midsommar, but it took me time to love Midsommar. But I
Okay.
do love it, and I really like Beau is Afraid. That was one of my favorite films from that
Yeah.
year. So he has been very consistent in and from my experience. And Eddington, I think just by the premise itself, set in May of 2020, and basking upon that political hysteria and societal chaos, that rooted that time and place. It's both. It wants to play the card that is the definitive film for that time and place,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it feels too early. And equally, and not to repeat myself, but equally, we have seen so many projects about that specific time and place already that we already tired of it.
Yeah. Fair.
There are many projects about this time, because everybody wants to speak about it, their own experiences and such. But this one wants to encapsulate it, but through jet black satire and a play in the Western genre, and there are a couple things that Ari Aster does that help cement what he wants to do. That he mentioned in the post premiere press conference, that he made the film out of fear. And you feel that fear. You feel that he's worried about the state of the U.S. And how it's crumbling down year through year. It's getting even worse, and somehow he comments on that we haven't changed. Even 5 years have passed and things have remained the same, and everything is still effed up. It's still all deteriorating from the ground up. It's everything is catapulting. And but Ari Aster wants to do a lot of things. There's things about Black Lives Matter. There's a thing about vaccines. There's a thing about TikTok and influencers, and there's a thing about religion, and there's a lot of stuff. And somehow it feels very self-indulgent. And the thing was that Beau is Afraid is a very self-indulgent movie, and even as a fan, I'll admit that. But I think the self-indulgence in that movie adds to the narrative. In this case, self-indulgence is the movie and doesn't add to it. It makes it an even more frustrating experience. Meanwhile, in Bro's Afraid, the frustration comes within the frustration of the character, because he's anxious, and everything that happens to him, it catapults. But
Sure.
I was just extremely annoyed. I was very, very much like, I want this to be over. And when it was done, I was like, thank God. Like I was like that breath, like, oh, I want to get out of here. Like,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate because he is a good filmmaker. He's a great filmmaker, in fact, but it's unfortunate that his first dud was in competition, at Cannes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I am really curious is maybe the right word for this one. I'm admittedly not the biggest Ari Aster fan. I do
okay,
like him overall, but I'm certainly not in love with his work in by any stretch of the imagination. Hereditary, I think, is great to a point, and then I think it jumps off a cliff. Midsommar for me is far and away his best work, even if Beau is Afraid might be my favorite of them.
okay.
I'm
Oh,
just in
okay.
love with the ambition of Beau is Afraid. It is a messy film. It is
Yeah,
very self-indulgent to your point, but there's something about that ambition and its humor and its just wild antics that I really enjoyed. It is a flawed movie, but the one that I enjoy the most, despite those blemishes. So he is an interesting filmmaker. He is a bit all over the place. All three movies I would describe as self-indulgent in one way or another.
yeah,
Now, Midsommar, I think, takes those indulgences and really utilizes it in a great way that is
yeah,
effective and poignant. Um, it's varying degrees of success in the others. So that is to say, I'm curious with this how he's evolving in the sense that those first two films are clear horror films. Beau is Afraid is kind of, in that middle ground a little bit. And
yeah,
this is black satire, as you're describing.
yeah,
So,
and Western as well.
and Western, yeah. So he's certainly trying new and different things. And I can appreciate that. I can appreciate that he's not just settling to be the hereditary Midsommar director. He could do that his entire career, and the people that love those films, I'm sure, would appreciate that. This at the end of his career, Eddington may sit there as one of those films that falls through the cracks that people don't really love in time. I don't know, but I can still appreciate that he wants to stretch himself and do something new and different.
Yeah.
So that at the very least has me curious. But to your point, would I be surprised if this ends up being terrible? No, I would not at all be surprised if that is the case. But who knows? Maybe I'll be surprised by it. We'll see. We'll see whenever that one comes out. So
Well,
I
it's soon
believe, yeah, and I believe
in July.
A24's got their hands on this one. So yeah, we're gonna get that one fairly soon. I am looking forward to that. Um, the next one, I know we're running a little late on time, but there's a few more I want to get to. Earlier I mentioned the that Lynn Ramsey was on my top 10 most anticipated of the entire year. Another film that sits there is the Linklater film,
Okay.
which is maybe a bit ironic because, and this might be one of my biggest cinematic sins. I'm not a huge fan of Breathless.
Okay.
It's not one of my favorites. I think it's like there's certainly lots to admire about it, the filmmaking and how inspirational it was for the time. Like the history of that film cannot be denied for sure. But I think as a movie, it leaves a little bit to be desired for me. It's not one of my favorite French New Wave films.
I agree. Me too.
However, I do love Linklater. Linklater is one of my favorite American directors working, and him taking a stab at the making of that movie does intrigue me, especially with that cast. What should I make of it? What did you think?
Okay. Okay. I'll try to summarize my thoughts because I have a lot to say about this one. Um,
Okay.
okay, so like you, I'm not the biggest fan of Breathless, and I have grown to love Godard because I wasn't a
Yeah.
fan. I thought he was a pompous oaf, but as I have aged, I have tend to love him, and I have tend to like research about him, read about him, and watch documentaries about him, interviews and such. And I think his last film, Scenarios, which screened at last year's Cannes and saw in the New York Film Festival, was
Mhm.
so heartbreaking. It was like a goodbye, like a farewell and a last warning from him. And he finished that film the day before he um died, before he passed from euthanasia.
Yeah.
And it was very like striking because you knew that detail before watching the film and watching him like record himself, and it was very like haunting. It was like very like difficult to see in some way, shape, or form because you
Sure.
hear his voice, his last breaths are there, his last words
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
basically there. So, but
Yeah.
in summary, I have grown to love Godard. So when I heard that Richard Linklater was going to do like a film that honored the movement that Godard, as well Truffaut and Romer and all the other Cahiers du Cinema and Calle directors made with the French New Wave.
Yeah.
I was a little bit perplexed. Because one, it is an American, and that doesn't, no, it isn't a bad thing that an American is doing it, but it is a little bit odd of a move. It is a
Sure.
little bit tricky per se.
Yeah.
And
I wouldn't have guessed that Linklater would have been the one to do it. That is for sure.
yeah, me
It's a little bit
neither, me
surprising.
neither.
Yeah.
But in some way, although he isn't technically or aesthetically or stylistically inspired by the French New Wave, his works contain this free spiritedness of the French New Wave. It has that sense. You see it in his early work, specifically Slacker. It is boots on ground, like small cameras, point and shoot. Like characters, like real life stuff. And basically what encapsulated the French New Wave, although he doesn't have the jump cuts and the aesthetics of those directors. The free spiritedness is what guided him, and
that's his thing. Like
yeah,
I'm sorry to jump in here. I obviously
no
haven't seen the
worries.
film, but I don't know if I would want Linklater to make a French New Wave style movie on Breathless.
Yeah.
Like maybe that could be interesting in the right hands. I don't know. But if Linklater is going to do it, I think it would be best if he does it as a Linklater film. And again, I can't speak to it. I haven't seen it, but I like that to me makes sense that he took that approach.
No,
I'll
no,
say.
you have set it up properly because he doesn't do no okay. First off, he emulates in some way Breathless. You have the actors that look very much like the people they're
Sure.
interpreting, although
Sure.
to although to some extent it does look like they're doing cosplay, with the exception of a few
Mm,
people, like Zoe Dutch, who plays Jean Seberg, who nails the accent very much, and she looks a lot like Jean Seberg, and
mm,
it's very cool. But
yeah.
but Linklater, although there are like it's black and white, and it has a couple things here and there that emulate the French New Wave, or in this case, Breathless. He reenacts scenes from Breathless, which I thought the film could have lost that. It isn't
Sure.
necessary, but it is in essence a hangout film from Linklater. But the hangout is the making of Breathless, and I didn't like it, and I have many problems with it. But people have said like I need to give it a chance later on, because the thing is he doesn't care that him doing this film, will make Godard and Truffaut like roll in their grave. Like if they were alive, they're going to like shame him. Ultimately, he doesn't care about that. He just wants to like honor the directors and the people that made this movement. But the film lacks why, the reason, like why, like it shows you a couple things here and there from the making of Breathless, and the people involved. There's Varda, and there's Romer and Robert Bresson, and it shows you each and every one of them like with a title card. Like Varda appears as Agnes Varda, and Romer Eric Romer, with a bunch of title cards. But the film doesn't like it doesn't express what made Breathless, like
Mm,
what made it like one of the best films of all time, like not in my regard, but like
okay.
in the overall cinema regard. It didn't have that. There
Yeah.
are a few magical moments that may be true or maybe not. Linklater had people who worked with Godard in his production, that may know if this happened or not. But there are a few moments that I have research, and I don't see if that happened or not. But there's one scene where he talks to Rossellini, and in that film, Rossellini is the inspiration of Godard. He's one of the few filmmakers that
Sure.
he and the rest of the crew like loved and admired, and it's like a conversation between hero and the student, and
Sure. Yeah.
somehow that translates, because in that way, it's like appreciation. And in another
Yeah.
scene, like Godard is like walking, and then you see like Bresson shooting a scene of pickpocket on the subway, on an abandoned tunnel, and you're like, oh, so like over there, like there is a possibility that like if you ran through in that time, if you ran through the streets of Paris or France overall, you might see people like in other productions. You might enter upon another production, so that might have happened. But I don't know. It adds a little bit of that magic that tells, like,
Yeah.
encapsulates the feeling. But I don't think
Yeah.
the film like elaborates why, like the why this movement so important to other people. So if you don't know much about the French New Wave or the directors, you might think it's just another
Yeah.
movie about movie making.
Yeah. And that's why I think, and maybe this wasn't your intent, but why you sold me on this movie. Because what you're describing is everything that I love about Linklater. And also, I am a fan of movies about movies. There's something about
Yeah.
the art and the magic of film that obviously we all love. That's why we're here. And
Yeah.
I do love seeing films that tackle, the making of those things. And Linklater's best work for me is when it is loose, when it is them just hanging out. That's what I love about the Before trilogy, or Everybody Wants Some, for example. That's nothing more than just a baseball hangout movie, or Waking Life. Like I love those movies that are free flowing, that are just characters hanging out. And if that's what this is, then I'm certainly going to love it as a Linklater experience. You're probably right. It might not be insightful as far as Breathless goes or the French New Wave. It might not tap into the importance of that. But if it's just a movie where I get to see Godard hang out with Rossellini and Truffaut and Agnes Varda and all these characters that come and go, then yeah, sign me up. That sounds awesome. Like that to me is what I was hoping this film would be in a lot of ways. So if it is, then I think I'm gonna love it. And it was hilarious because I know it didn't work for you, but even as you're talking about what it is, it just kept piquing my interest level.
No,
Like, okay.
and that's great. A lot of people liked it. A lot of people loved it. There were a couple that were in the same vein as me. Who thought
Yeah,
it could
sure.
have
Yeah,
done
the
more.
reactions
But
were kind of mixed. Yeah.
yeah, but a lot of people like liked it for what it was, for like for specifically that. Like it's another like Richard Linklater hangout movie, but in this case, with people,
Yeah.
real people, people that we know.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, okay, as we wind down here, I did want to leave you some space to talk about any other gems that stood out to you. But at the very least, I wanted to ask about the Petzold film, because I'm a big Petzold fan as well. What did you think of his latest?
Oh, I loved it. I loved it. But I
Mm,
love Christian Petzold. I love him.
yeah.
I think he is one of the best like contemporary German
Yes.
directors, and his collaborations with Paula Beer have been
Oh, so
like
good.
astute, has been so magical, and especially Afire from 2 years ago, which was just like magic. And
Oh,
this one
yeah.
is no other. Like this one elevates, their already elegant collaboration is even more elegant. Even though this is like the minor film in his filmography, and Paula Beer's, it is a film that lasts less than 90 minutes. It's a very short, compact film, but it's still
Mm,
very elegant. It's still very like touching and gripping, and there's some sense of malaise in it, but it's rooted within sadness of people handling their griefs and handling their sadness within the formation of a folks family. I won't say much because if you like him a lot, I want you to see it with with
yeah.
less details, the better.
Yeah, for sure.
Since it is already like a very compact film, it is a very easy, comfortable watch. But it
Okay.
is very fascinating. It was one of my favorites from not only the director's Fortnite, but the festival overall. I really liked it a lot.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to that one. Love Christian Petzold, and yeah, you're absolutely right. Everything he does with Paul Beer is magic. It's just absolutely spectacular. So, yeah, really looking forward to that one. Had to ask about it. All right, before we get out of here, any other films that we haven't talked about that we need to mention that stood out to you from the
Yeah,
festival this year?
I'll try to be quicker. Okay, I'll try because one
Okay.
of them is Alpha by
Oh
Juliette
yeah.
Bruno. But
Yeah, oh, yes, yes. Of course, we got to bring up.
yeah, a
Yeah.
previous Palm winner and the director of my favorite film, Raw. I just
Okay.
love her. I love Julia Ducournau, and this film was massacred. I think was the best word possible. It was massacred by
Yeah.
every single soul, every single soul, except a few others. And I'm one of them. I loved it. I really,
Okay, so you're down on
really,
sentimental
really
value,
loved it.
but up on this one. So you're
I mean,
just swinging that
I like
pendulum.
I like sentimental value now after
Yeah,
resting a
yeah.
bit, but I wasn't
Sure,
like blown
sure.
away by it. But I loved Alpha. I will admit there is some bias on my part because
Sure.
I love
Fair.
Ducournau so much, and she's the director of my favorite film, so there's an even more bias in my
Yeah.
regard, and
Fair. Yeah.
it is irresponsible as a film critic, in some regard, to have that sense of bias, but
Hey, we
a
all have
little,
them. We
yeah,
all
we
have
all.
them.
But I really liked it. I really loved it a lot. Ducournau just expels her fear of death with this one, with some of the images she does. She picks apart a time in her life that she lived back in the 80s in France and 80s and 90s in France, and just makes an original and creative feature. It's, man, it's heartbreaking. I could talk about this one a lot. We're running sort of time, and it's getting a little bit late. But I took man, I was just blown away by it, and I think people were expecting another Titan. We're expecting another
Yeah.
like explosive and rampant feature. This is rampant in some regard, but it is a more mature work. It is less focused on that sense of provocation that was in Raw and Titan, with
Interesting. Okay.
those key scenes, with the car
Yeah.
scene and
Yeah.
cannibalism and Raw, but in this one is more
Yeah.
mature and more personal. We see a
Okay.
new version of Ducournau, and I was just like hold. I felt very much moved by the film. It has a very bruised heart, but it is a heart
Yeah.
in all senses.
I am curious. This is another one of those I am curious about. Admittedly, I'm not the biggest fan of Raw, but I did really go for Titan a
Yeah.
few years ago. So I don't know what to expect here with Julia Ducournau and Alpha. I was really curious though going into the festival, but to your point, when those reactions dropped,
Yeah.
it wasn't great. people were not happy. A lot of
Yeah,
disappointment, we'll say. A lot of
the
disappointment.
screening was very weird. People didn't know how to react. They were just looking at each other with a face of disgust, and some with a face like, "What did I just see?" And
Yeah.
I was with a smile on my face. I was like, "This is
Well,
fascinating. I
and
love it."
that's the thing though with at least with the two films that she's done so far, maybe you have to take some of that with a grain of salt.
Yeah,
Although what you're describing with Alpha does sound like it is different than Raw and Titan,
yeah,
but with those two films, there's absolutely a thick layer of what did I just watch?
yeah,
Like, but that's what's interesting with those films. Like I do think she's able to manage a great story with like this maybe pun intended raw humanity that comes with her characters in those films. It didn't quite come together for me with Raw, but it very much did with Titan. And I do appreciate that about her ambition as a filmmaker. So I'm still going into Alpha open minded, and we'll see. I guess we'll see whenever it comes out. I'm not sure when it's gonna get a drop here in the United States, but I'm still curious. I'm still gonna
yeah.
stay really really open minded for that one. Anything else come to mind for you, or that you at least wanted to mention before we get out of here?
Yeah, I'll do with this one quick. Romeria by Carla Simon. It's another filmmaker I love. She's a
Okay.
Spanish filmmaker. She has done, this is her third feature. The
Okay.
three of them basically form a uniform family trilogy, where she takes experiences of her life and tells them in poetic ways, that not only refers to her own life, but also like somehow makes them like very relatable, very like that everyone can connect. And I think this
Sure.
one not only is her best, but it is her most personal. This one is where you see more of Carla, more of her own life. It centers around a young girl who wants to become a filmmaker but needs a death certificate from her parents who passed away from AIDS back in the 90s. And
Okay.
she needs to go to her grandfather's, her biological grandfather's house to get like that, a certificate that basically says their blood, the kinship basically.
Okay.
And it is this experience of her, like after living so much time with adopted parents and going back to the place of the birth of her parents, and it's her learning details about her parents, and somehow reality and retellings of her parents' lives and memories like intertwine, and the actors that play, that basically play her, the protagonist that plays her also plays a version of her mother. And there's a cousin that plays her cousin, but also her father. And in some and another, somehow it may be just me like reading a bit much about it, but there's elements of a film by Carlos Saura called Deprisa, Deprisa, Faster,
Okay.
Faster in
Hmm.
English, that somehow connects with it, not only in the thematic of it all and in the narrative, but the actors look very much alike, like the actors in Deprisa, Deprisa. Like if you see pictures of them side by side, like there's a connection. And
Interesting.
Simon has elaborated a lot that that the late Caldo Saura is one of her influences, and she has referenced him before, but not in this blatant fashion, or at least that's how I see it. And man, it is a really fascinating and poetic work that it was also received very well, but I did like it a lot more than others. I was just
Okay.
entranced by it all.
Awesome. Well, I'll add that one to the list. It wasn't on my radar all that much, but it sounds really fascinating. So we'll definitely add that one. The last one I want to mention, I want to ask about before we get out of here. I would be remiss if I didn't ask about Kelly Reichardt's new film. Did you get to see The Mastermind?
Unfortunately not,
No.
because
Okay.
it was on, because the Kelly Reichardt film was on the last day
Yeah, it was
with
near the end.
alongside the
Yeah.
Dardine brothers on film. And it's unfortunate because when when she had like showing up, it was also on the last day. And I don't know
Yeah.
who she pissed off. I don't know who, who she, why she's on the last day. But most of the people are already gone by that point. Nobody sticks to
Sure.
the entire festival, so it's easier to get
Yeah.
tickets and less people see it. But from what I've heard, it's really great. It's really fascinating, and I like her work a lot. And so
Yeah, she's one of my
I want to
favorites.
see
That's
it.
why I
I
had to
want to
ask.
see it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, was just really curious because she is one of my favorite American directors for sure. All
Amen.
right. Well, thanks so much for your time going to the festival for one and seeing the films and writing the reviews. And thanks for joining me here.
Thank you much for having me.
Absolutely. Where can we find you on social media once again?
Hector A at Letterbox, Instagram, and Twitter.
All right. Yeah. Be sure to give Hector a follow. And of course, you can see all of his reviews at InSessionFilm.com from this year's Cannes Film Festival. Really looking forward to the fall and seeing all of these films. It looks like we're in for one hell of a year. I'm really, really excited. So With all of that said, I just want to note that the main show this week, episode 638, is out. We talk about Mission Impossible, of course, coming off the heels of The Final Reckoning. Our review of The Final Reckoning is available as well. The great Griffin Schiller from Film Speak joined us for that conversation. It was quite the cathartic experience. So please go and give that a listen as well. Thanks again, Hector, for joining me. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast.